Good morning, everybody. This is a live extreme weather briefing as we have a monster snow and ice storm that's going to impact a large swath of the southern and the eastern United States. And in fact, that snowstorm is still happening right now over parts of Missouri, western Tennessee, getting a cold rain so far this morning. It's eventually going to change over to snow once that cold air filters in and then that cold upper low moves overhead. And I also want to talk about the slight risk of severe weather, including a tornado threat tonight. And that's going to be as the coastal storm moves east and then off to the northeast, bringing ice and snow. Looks like the biggest snowfall totals for this entire storm are going to happen across the mountains of western North Carolina. But then a prolific icing event across the Piedmont of South Carolina and North Carolina. Looks like over an inch of ice possibly near and just to the southeast of the Greenville area and to the east of Greenville, all the way up through the Charlotte area as well in that Carolina Piedmont. That is as that warm nose is going to come up and over top that sub-freezing air. That warm air just above the ground causes those liquid water droplets to fall down into that sub-freezing air, and then they'll freeze on impact, and that's when you get that icing. And we are going to break down that severe weather threat as well. We've got that slight risk across northwestern Florida all the way down through the Tampa area. I am going to break down that threat as well, the threat of surface-based instability. Here is the latest snowfall total loop from the GFS. This is as of this morning, right now, the 12Z GFS, which is coming in hot. And you can see that snowfall bullseye that is going to be happening in the mountains of western North Carolina. Also, look how Nashville to Knoxville area also gets hammered to the west of the Appalachian Mountains from this snowstorm. And it looks like several inches of snow in the Nashville area. That's going to be very impactful for that location. A 46-inch type snowfall in Nashville will cause major problems. And some of the forecast models are showing that there could even be greater than that with some dynamical cooling and that cold pocket of air aloft associated with that upper level low, helping to increase the snowfall rates for locations like Nashville. There is that little bit of a shadow for that precipitation right on the western slopes of the Appalachians, up there, far northeastern Tennessee, southeastern Kentucky. Not sure if that's going to verify or not. That's just because of that low-level jet, that moisture transport, basically a shadow right on the other side of the Appalachians could happen here. This is a little bit different where this isn't an event basically where you get moisture getting picked up over the Great Lakes upstream, cold northwesterly flow, orographic lift in the northwestern slopes of those Appalachians. This one's more of a coastal storm, a southern stream system that then lifts up to the northeast on the east side of the Appalachians, and that's associated with a low-level jet to a conveyor belt of moisture out of the due south. That's dumping out that moisture in the form of very heavy snowfall across the mountains of western North Carolina, but a little bit of a shadow on the backside. And look at this ice loop. This is really concerning right here, the ice component of this storm system, especially those areas in blue. That's very close to my mom's house. I'm just to the north of Greenville, South Carolina here in Dixie Alley headquarters, Team Dominator headquarters, doing this live briefing. I am going to be chasing this storm, waking up in the very early morning hours tomorrow morning. And I'm going to try to cover both the ice in upstate South Carolina and also the big time snow in the mountains of western North Carolina. I know that Maggie Valley area up there is a beautiful area for that snowfall. Inner tubes going down the hills there. The ski resorts, Beach Mountain, the one that had that water line leak that was blasting the people on the chairlift. You'll definitely be getting up to a foot, probably more than a foot of snow from this storm system, and that should definitely cover up some of those water lines out there at Beach Mountain. And I may try to sample some of that powder myself in western North Carolina. And I do want to break down the snow that's happening right now as well. This that you're seeing on radar, that is all rain in the Memphis area. Eventually, it is going to change over, maybe a couple of inches of snow here across western Tennessee. Bigger totals across central and especially northeastern Tennessee. Out here, the GFS model showing several inches of snow across northeastern Tennessee, mainly just to the east of the Nashville area. But it is possible that you could get several inches of snow in Nashville as well, maybe a 3 to 6 inch type of a snow. But right now, this precipitation is falling as rain, and eventually, as that cold upper low comes in, as this Alberta Clipper is diving off to the south. I saw a report of heavy snow recently within this band up near Rolla, Lebanon area along I-44. Some heavier snow. Now it's out over the Ozarks of south central Missouri, down toward West Plains, starting to get some snow as well. But let's take a look at the surface map. And that's how we could really tell, obviously, what is going on at the surface by looking at those real observations. And you can see that 4-star snow, I-44. Looks like that's relatively close to the Rolla area. Also got snow starting to bleed in through the Ozarks, south central Missouri. You're a little bit too warm in the Ozarks right now, but those temperatures are falling down, at least in south central Missouri, north central Arkansas. Changing over to snow, though. Northwest Arkansas, 3-star snow there, moderate snow. That cold air filtering in rapidly on the backside of this system. That is going to change it over to snow across the Ozarks of northern Arkansas. Probably end up with several inches of snow out there, but look at that 3-star snow. Southwestern Missouri. Temperatures down to 23 degrees there near Joplin, Branson area. So temperatures are absolutely plummeting on the backside of this potent Alberta Clipper. This Clipper's dropping southeast, then it's going to hit that pivot point right near Tennessee and then turn off to the northeast. And right when it hits that pivot point, that's when that system's going to tap into the Gulf of Mexico, and that's why you're seeing some of those bigger totals in central and eastern Tennessee. It finally gets that moisture tap. Let's go back to the radar really quick. I want to sample some of those snowfall rates down here in northwestern Arkansas. Looking at Fort Smith radar. So these are some pretty good snowfall rates down just to the southeast of the Huntsville, Arkansas area. Great area to look for gems as well in the Ozarks. Beautiful national forest out in this area. Sure, Storm Chaser Brian Emfinger is going to get some incredible drone shots of the snow here on the Ozarks. We can loop this as well. And you can certainly see the spin associated with this up near Reed Spring, north of Branson. Looks like you're getting in on the snow as well. A little bit of snow. But notice how it is just a little bit spotty and bandy as well. You have these bands that it looks a little bit anemic, the precipitation shield. That's because this is an Alberta Clipper diving off to the southeast, and it is just a little bit moisture starved, at least until it rounds the bend. And once it undergoes that pivot point, and it already looks like this system is already starting to tap into the Gulf of Mexico. Looking at some of these surface reflections here, surface obs, 45 degrees, so still a long way to go until that changes over to snow across northwestern Tennessee. So let's look now a little bit at a deeper dive at the models. This is the NAM model, and you can see that surface low diving off to the southeast. This is right about now, getting pretty close to midday, just barreling down to the south, and then it's going to hit that pivot point down in the mid-south, and that's when it's going to really start to tap into the Gulf of Mexico. It already is starting to this morning. You can already see tapping into the Gulf of Mexico there, a little bit of a moisture feed. 1042 high over southeastern Canada. That is key. It's always key to have that high pressure up there, cold air mass in place. And as this coastal storm pushes off to the east, it's going to pull even more of that cold air down on the east side of the Appalachians. Look at that cold pocket of air coming in aloft. So it is all liquid through the afternoon, through the late afternoon across the state of Tennessee. And then overnight tonight as that upper level low begins to overspread. And look at the Ozarks getting hammered. Northern Arkansas there. That's at 0Z tonight, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Ozarks getting lit up by snow. Deformation banding up there as well, beneath that cold upper low. And then you begin to change over that precipitation across northwestern Tennessee late evening tonight, 9 or 10 p.m. And that's when those impacts are going to arrive in the Memphis area around midnight. You definitely start to get that changeover, wintry precipitation dominating the state of Arkansas there as well. And it begins as all rain by midnight as well in the Nashville area. The elevated terrain there of the plateau begins to get some snowfall just after midnight in the early morning hours, but you need that cold upper low to move overhead. It is possible that some of this heavier precipitation could pull down those colder temperatures aloft. I can show you at the 500 millibar temperatures. Look at that bowling ball aloft. So when you're talking about dynamical cooling, you have these cold temperatures just above the ground. And if you get some heavier precipitation within this, it can change that over to snow a little bit faster, increase those snowfall rates, and you can end up with a lot more snowfall than some of the forecast models are showing. And you definitely get that cold air aloft with this upper level storm system. And that's going to be crucial to changing it over to snow in Nashville. And you definitely have that cold air aloft. Let's take a look at a forecast sounding at 12Z from the NAM. And boy, is it going to be close in Nashville. Still has that temperature above freezing late morning tomorrow. But I think that dynamical cooling is going to be the key to changing that over to snow. And again, this is the NAM model too, so we should be looking at some of the other models. And it looks like by tomorrow at about midday, that upper level low moves in across Tennessee. You change it over to all snow during the morning hours, sometime during the morning hours tomorrow. If dynamical cooling is able to accelerate that changeover, then I do think that there could be some more snow in the Nashville area. And then just look at that ice storm pounding the southeastern U.S. Piedmont, Carolina, Piedmont, upstate South Carolina to northeastern Georgia. But boy, is the NAM a little bit too warm. It looks like the NAM is really struggling here with being a bit too warm. Look at the mountains of western North Carolina, even showing that area a little bit icing instead of snow, when really it's likely to be more of this snowfall. I'm going to go back to the GFS. The GFS shows a changeover tomorrow morning in the Nashville area, and some of this higher terrain happens a little bit earlier. Dynamical cooling is going to be the key to getting that big snowfall in Nashville from this system. Look at that low, and then you get a warm nose that develops upstream. That warm nose that is moving up and over top that cold air at the surface. But then by tomorrow afternoon, it changes back over to snow across upstate South Carolina with the wraparound. Even though that low is lagging behind a little bit, that's the parent low. It is going to eject off to the northeast as this lifts northeast. Change over to ice, south central Virginia, the Danville area. Looks like it's going to be a big ice storm. Southeastern Virginia, eastern North Carolina changes over to all rain with that warm conveyor belt here. And then the system lifts off to the northeast, bringing all rain across southern New England, New York City. Definitely an interior New England type of a storm. Upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, ski areas, Mount Washington getting hammered. Berkshires there of western Massachusetts are going to get into the action. And then you see all these meso lows as well lined up here. You have the parent low back to the west, but then you get new circulations, new meso lows that'll form near latent heating maxima within that warm conveyor belt. Basically like a cycling tornado. You have your occluding tornado that tries to weaken, and you can get a new tornado that will cycle off to the east. The same thing happens on the large mesoscale, synoptic scale with these coastal storms as they're interacting with that temperature gradient in the Gulf, the west side of the Gulf Stream. So this thing deepens to about upper 970s as it moves across eastern Massachusetts. Might even get a skinny squall line out there on the Cape. This is by Monday, late morning, very windy as well. And it's going to be windy behind this coastal storm as it begins to deep into the east of the Appalachians, and those areas that are hammered by icing and that heavy snow, likely going to see power outages as well across the southern Appalachians and the Carolina Piedmont from this very heavy snow. So my plan of attack is to wake up very early here in upstate South Carolina, and I'm going to cover the early precipitation. I'm going to get up into the mountains of North Carolina to cover that snow, and then I'm going to drop back into upstate South Carolina, cover that icing event, and then the wraparound as it changes back over to snow on the backside here. I'm also going to be covering that event. And then it looks like finally the western slopes of the Appalachians get in on the action on the backside as these northwesterly winds pick up the moisture over the Great Lakes, deposit some of that moisture in the form of snowfall. So let's take a little detailed look quickly at some of these snowfall reports or snowfall forecast. This is your Kuchera. Look at how spotty it gets, more terrain dependent across the northeastern U.S. with that track of the coastal storm just inland. A little bit of a westward trend. So it looks like the GFS and the European model have kind of agreed on the average between the two. Average thermodynamics, the average between the two, the warm nose strength as well. Looks like several inches of snow in Greenville, but also some ice. It's not going to be all snow down in Greenville, down there at that elevation, a little bit below 1,000 feet. At the above the escarpment, though, locations like Pretty Place, Caesar's Head up there at about 3,000 feet, all snow. Probably going to be in excess of a foot up there as that moist conveyor belt just hammering the edge of that terrain, squeezing out that moisture. The GFS is picking up on a bit of a shadow here across northeastern Tennessee, but definitely shows several inches of snow in Nashville. That dynamical cooling is going to be your friend for snow lovers in Nashville, but a very impactful winter event down here in the southern U.S., just not used to this big-time snow. Looks like to the north of Atlanta, could get several inches of snow across the higher terrain of northern Georgia, up near the Jasper area, northeastern corner of Georgia, that higher terrain. Also up near the North Carolina, South Carolina border, several inches of snow up there, probably in excess of a foot above 3,000 feet. Those valleys, areas like Asheville down in the valleys, not going to get as much. I think that warm nose, and you're not going to get as much of that cold air. You may notice waking up this morning that we just don't have that Arctic air mass in place down here, at least in the Piedmont to the east of the Appalachians. And I think that some of those valleys likely will have a little bit lesser in the way of that accumulation. You're definitely going to have to get up to the very higher terrain up there really to get those bigger totals well in excess of a foot. But the ski resorts, western North Carolina, are going to get hammered. Probably a good 3 to 6 inches of snow down into Asheville, 3 to 6 inches as well southeast of the escarpment, as you're probably going to mix and change over to freezing rain as that warm nose moves by. And I do want to show you that warm nose. It's a beautiful thing, a low-level jet. So this is at 15Z tomorrow morning. Look at that conveyor belt. It's possible that with this conveyor belt out of a more easterly direction, that maybe the warm nose could be a little bit overdone on the GFS model. And with dynamical cooling, and as that upper low moves overhead, it could change over to some heavier precipitation. But look at this low-level jet ramping up, that feed right off the Atlantic. That low-level jet is pushing 70 knots here in upstate South Carolina. And you're going to be mixing down those winds, especially in some of those heavy precipitation shields, especially in the terrain as well. Up there near Pretty Place, Caesar's Head, you're going to be getting blasted by winds. And it's going to start late night tonight, tomorrow morning, 12Z. This is about 7 a.m. That's when that low-level jet is really cranking across northern Georgia. There's your 850 low. It's going to be one of those deals with very heavy snow, possibly changing over to a period of freezing rain, wind, big easterlies mixing down to the surface, causing power flashes all over the place, widespread power outages. And then that low-level jet lifts a little bit further north. And then we should begin to change back over to a period of wraparound snow down into the upstate South Carolina and up into North Carolina. And as that cold upper low moves overhead, it's going to continue to squeeze out that snowfall. Look at that upper level low. absolute bowling ball over western North Carolina. And by the time this moves in, it's definitely going to be changing everything back over to snow, and it's going to be on top of all of that ice that happens with some wraparound snows moving in across the western Carolinas. Banding features here associated with the upper low to the west of the Appalachians as well. This is going to be the key to squeezing out that several inches of snow in Nashville. And then by tomorrow evening, you still have some banding, some wraparound, and then the system with that conveyor belt hammering Virginia now, pumping up the coastline. Shenandoah National Park's going to get in on the action. Looks like some ice in there with that warm conveyor belt. So let's look at the latest European, which we're going to have to look at the 6Z model last night. And the models are definitely coming into agreement with the position of that low, that conveyor belt, the rain snow line into southeastern Virginia. So tonight, the European model begins the precipitation around midnight as a period of snow and ice, snow across western Carolinas into northeastern Georgia. So it is still a little bit cooler than the GFS, and boy, look at that. See where that upper level low is located. So it's not a cold pocket of air that is happening. The European model definitely is picking up on colder surface temperatures. Very close to freezing as that precipitation starts just after midnight across upstate South Carolina, into the upper 20s, even the mid 20s up there, the higher terrain of western North Carolina. So that's the European model. Let's just see what it looks like at surface temperatures. The GFS is a little bit warmer, but only a degree or two. And it does appear that the GFS is just a little bit warmer. That's the 6Z GFS. We go over to the 12Z. And the 12Z has trended just a little bit cooler as well. It just seems like the European model is still picking up on that dynamical cooling with that heavier precipitation moving into upstate South Carolina, and it's dumping more snow. And I have seen this play out. Remember that event last year? My mom's lived here for several years. My sisters have lived here for over a decade or so, and it does seem like the models underestimate the power of dynamical cooling with that heavier precipitation out here, but it does look like the 6Z HRRR has trended a little bit closer to the GFS with the strength of this warm nose and a very damaging icing event evolving across the Carolina Piedmont. By this time, I'm going to be heading up to Caesar's Head and up toward Pretty Place to intercept some of the heavier snow by tomorrow morning. And boy, the European model, the 6Z European model, changes everything over to ice, even on the North Carolina side. Hendersonville changes over to ice as that warm nose just dominates. And then at 18Z, peak warm nose action. It looks like we remain ice here in upstate South Carolina. Big icing event across the Carolina Piedmont. And this is by midday tomorrow, midday Sunday. That's the 6Z European with the position of that surface low anchored over the Carolina Piedmont. We have seen that windshield wiper effect. This will change a little bit, but notice how the 6Z GFS and 6Z European came into agreement with that surface low position. And now the 12Z GFS. Looks like that surface low is going to move through eastern Carolinas and bring that ice storm up through the Carolina Piedmont, South Carolina Piedmont, all the way up Virginia, snow on the backside. But the GFS and the European model are coming into agreement. It does look like it's going to be more of an ice event across upstate South Carolina, the exception being up there above 3,000 feet. But it looks like it's going to change over to ice there as well, even above the escarpment. You just don't have that real deep Arctic air mass in place out ahead of this system. So I think that you got to favor the relative strength of the warm nose over that Arctic air at the surface and believe that you're going to change things over to ice. And that's a big problem here for upstate South Carolina. Ice is even more impactful than that snow, and accumulate on the power lines, lead to widespread numerous power outages. But just for fun, let's see what the snow maps look like for the European model as well. European model just has Nashville getting pasted with a foot of snow. So keep that in mind. With a little dynamical cooling out there, it can be a lot more effective at increasing those snowfall rates beneath that cold upper level low. So this thing has the signals of overperforming out here across central Tennessee with dynamical cooling. I think to the east of that cold pocket upper level low, you got to favor the strength of the warm nose a little bit more across the Carolina Piedmont. More of an ice storm expected there, with those surface temperatures borderline just below freezing, and that warm nose shifting those temperatures just above the ground, above freezing. But then it remains all snow across the mountains of North Carolina, even into northeastern Georgia. But I could certainly see Nashville getting hammered by this snowstorm. Keep that in mind. This looks like an event that will overperform relative to the models beneath that cold upper low. So if I were living in Nashville, I'd be pretty excited about this event. I think it's probably going to overperform in terms of that snow. Here across the Carolina Piedmont, I think it's going to overperform in terms of ice. Mountains of North Carolina, mountains of Virginia, West Virginia, I think you're going to get hammered anyway. This is likely going to be the winner here. Appalachians type snow event. Southern Appalachians all the way up that spine. I'm going to be covering that whole thing. So now let's shift over towards severe weather. Northwestern Florida. We got a lot to cover during this briefing. Shift down toward northwestern Florida. We'll look at timing. It's going to be overnight tonight. We'll use the GFS to start. This is today, midday today. We'll go back on over to the 12Z models just because we can. And this is tonight, 0Z. 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That low-level jet begins to materialize here across the Gulf of Mexico. 850 low, centered over southeastern Arkansas into western Mississippi. And then at 10 p.m. tonight, 9 to 10 p.m., look at this ramp up, that low-level jet into northwestern Florida. That's where your wind shear arrives, your moisture transport. Looking at the dew points, there you get those 60s dew points just coming on shore across the Florida Panhandle, just nosing into the 60s up to the I-10 corridor. That's why this slight risk is basically hugging the coastline of northwest Florida. But you do get that surface-based instability. Uh-oh. Almost lost my models there. That's at 10 p.m. Let's go toward midnight. Even deeper dew points up into the Tallahassee area, northwestern Florida. Some of those 60s dew points are even bleeding onshore the Florida Peninsula. A lot of dry, cold temperatures, though, across the open, deeper into the Florida Peninsula. And then just after early morning hours, you get a 63 dew point there, northwestern Florida, very near Tallahassee. And this model, the GFS model, is definitely underdoing the presence of surface-based instability along the periphery of this northeastern Gulf of Mexico. You're not pumping those 70s dew points off the warm loop current anymore, as we've already cleared out the Gulf of Mexico with a couple of these colder air masses. But let's take a look at the 3-kilometer NAM, our good friend, the 3-kilometer NAM. Even more aggressive with those dew points, hammering the Florida Big Bend, rising up into the mid-60s there, pumping up into the Florida Big Bend. Black Bear country down there. Covered a lot of those tropical systems. So there's your conveyor belt of moisture. And it looks like the 3-kilometer NAM has a better handle on those 70s dew points located there over the Gulf of Mexico loop current. Seems like the GFS is underdoing those dew points a bit available to this storm system. Let's take a look at the HRRR, see what it has for dew points over the open Gulf. Couple little dots out there of 70 plus down in the loop current. 3-kilometer NAM is definitely the most aggressive with that moisture. And this is at midnight. You can see this convective line with supercells over the northeastern Gulf of Mexico. Probably water spouts there with that broken line of supercells over the northeastern Gulf. Low-level jet out ahead of it. It looks like there's quite a lot of stable air and isentropic lift over northwestern Florida, but if any of these supercells are able to move onshore, Panama City Beach area, here well east of that, Florida Big Bend and off to the east of the Big Bend could certainly get some tornado potential. This is at the midnight hour, a little bit closer to Panama City. Some of these little supercell structures could have water spout potential as they come ashore during the overnight, midnight, into the early morning hours. It's about 1 a.m. Look at that convective line moving northeast. By 12Z, that convective line is starting to approach the Tampa Bay area. So even though most of the wind shear in that low-level jet's ejecting off to the northeast, you're going to have this trailing squall line that is going to be approaching the western peninsula of Florida. Ahead of it, there's going to be a strong low-level jet as well. Look at that, 50 to 70 knots. Big-time low-level jet, northwestern Florida. Very nicely shaped photographs, but a lot of stable air at the low levels. So I think this is going to be more of a tornado outbreak that unfolds over the open Gulf of Mexico waters. But to assess any presence of any surface-based instability, we can use the 0 to 1 kilometer EHI metric composite index that factors in that surface-based instability, plus your 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative shear. And it looks like some of that surface-based instability tries to meander onshore here near the Tampa Bay area by late morning tomorrow. This is about 8, 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Might get a water spout or two there coming onshore near Tampa Bay. Little bit of some surface-based instability, but we do have some favorable hodograph shape. A little bit of instability, not the most favorable lapse rates. You just don't have that elevated mix layer that's coming in over top here at the mid-levels to steepen those lapse rates. If this system originated over the Four Corners or the Mexican Plateau, then it would likely be associated with an elevated mix layer, some steeper lapse rates in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. But this thing's coming from Alberta, an Alberta clipper that's diving southeast. It's a little bit anemic now, and then as it rounds the bend, undergoes that pivot point, then it's going to infuse with that moisture. So it looks like at around midnight, the 3-kilometer NAM is picking up on a greater likelihood of surface-based instability meandering ashore here near the Florida Big Bend. You can see that this Big Bend area penetrates out into the open Gulf of Mexico a little bit further. So you're going to have a greater likelihood of some surface-based instability near Apalachicola. And there is your sounding. Look at that. Oh, wow. So that's your most favorable sounding for tornado potential, even though you don't have that elevated mix layer. The green line is your dew point, and that's really a key to the loaded gun sounding, is to get that dry pocket of air in the mid-levels of the atmosphere to steepen those lapse rates. But still, you have surface-based instability, your parcels lifting up from the surface, 67 over 65 as well, and a very favorable hodograph. Your low-level jet increasing to near 50 knots, surface wind about 15 knots out of the due south, creating a pretty stout shear vector in excess of 30 knots in the 0 to 1 kilometer layer. And then your mid and upper level winds shift to more of a southwesterly direction aloft. Storm motion is going to be about 40 knots right off the Gulf of Mexico. And your only surface-based instability is right along the coastline. So this is going to be an event that's going to be south of I-10, right around midnight into the early morning hours tomorrow, right when I'm waking up to start ripping the snowstorm here in the upstate Carolinas. Look at that, right at 7Z. That's about 1 in the morning, 1 to 2 in the morning Eastern time, Apalachicola. Stay tuned to your watches and warnings in Apalachicola, certainly. I know you're going to probably be asleep down there, but it does look like some surface-based instability is able to move just on shore there across the Florida Big Bend. Quite favorable photographs. Oh, wow. So we got a lot to cover. Big snow. Nocturnal tornado threat in the Florida Big Bend. And then it looks like stable air, continental air is dominating the Florida Peninsula. So I think it's going to prevent that instability axis from moving on to the main Florida Peninsula. So this is looking like a Florida Big Bend type of a severe weather event as that arc of convection pushes from west to east across the Florida Peninsula. Wow. So that's my weather report, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this long weather report, as this system is definitely going to be ramping up. Coastal storm. I'm going to be covering the southern Appalachian ice and the snow event. But we also have that tornado potential tonight, right around midnight, along the Florida Big Bend. Keep an eye out in Nashville. This definitely has the signature of an event that's going to overperform in terms of snow, with that cold pocket of air coming in over top of this system. Heavier precipitation will pull that cold air from just above the ground down to the ground, and should be enough of a difference maker to potentially even lead to a double-digit snowfall total across that area. So thank you, everybody, for tuning into my weather report. I will be going live early morning hours tomorrow. I'm also going to be doing a live Q&A for Facebook supporters exclusively when those new models come out this evening. That's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central. Thank you, Facebook supporters, for making it possible for me to stream live these weather briefings and to live Storm Chase over the last 3 years or so now. Time certainly does fly. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy this winter storm. Stay safe out there. Get those winter weather safety kits in place. Get your milk and bread and eggs and everything at the grocery store. Never stop chasing.